Why is it that some people like to get sexually spanked while tied to the bed, or relinquish control of their dominant partner and voluntarily enjoy getting humiliated during sex? What psychological purpose does BDSM serve? To make sense of the complex world of BDSM, one must be attentive not only to what is happening on the surface, but also to the symbolic meanings behind these behaviors. All BDSM activities involve gaining sexual pleasure from at least one of the three elements of pain, control, and humiliation. The theory of escape from the self, proposed in detail by social psychologist Baumeister in his book Masochism and the Self, is an integrated theory for understanding sexual sadomasochism, or BDSM in general. So what is escape from the self? To understand this theory, we first need to define the concept of self. In this context, self means a combination of the physical body and a set of meanings attached to it. Social and interpersonal maps, duties and responsibilities, membership in groups and organizations, individual values and goals, a person's past, and what he or she has in mind about his or her personality and identity, all in combination with the physical body, constitute the concept of the self. The concept of self extends into both the past and the future, and builds your identity. With this definition of self in mind, let's examine the theory of escape from the self. The general idea of this theory is that masochism can be a way of escaping the self. Why might anyone want to run away from themselves? Paul Bloom describes Roy Baumeister's theory in his book. Self-awareness carries a burden. In everyday life, you need to make decisions that you're responsible for, often disappointing others. You need to put a good face forward to the world. You have to manage your desires and deal with disappointment and guilt and shame. You're stuck with your memories, your worries about the future, and your anxieties about the immediate present. You're left with that same internal monologue, maybe a bit whiny, that you've had for a very long time. It's not hard to see how we could become sick of ourselves. Not just sick of the bodies we occupy, though this might happen too, but sick of our consciousness. Masochism provides an opportunity for self-escape. That is, an opportunity to temporarily distract oneself from all these unpleasant noises and distractions. Paul Bloom believes that the pleasure of engaging in activities such as intense exercise, solving a complex puzzle, or getting whipped is to rid ourselves of a sense of self-awareness. It's somewhat like meditation, but perhaps even better since meditation requires constant attention, whereas pain provides that sense of attention by itself. But how does masochism help escape from the self? Masochism takes one away from the high-level, symbolic, and meaningful aspects of self-awareness. Instead, awareness turns to the low-level, physical realm. Masochism, by breaking down the self, frees one from identity. Instead of an identity that extends into the past and the future, and carries a burden of responsibilities, the person becomes a body that is present only in the here and now, and passively experiences simple sensations and movements. During a sadomasochistic activity, one can find distance from oneself. It does not completely eliminate the self, but it does minimize its presence. BDSM is a huge playground. In this playground, people put aside their familiar and ordinary selves and may even have the feeling of becoming someone else. High-level awareness is related to meaning. The sense of identity that one has about oneself is associated with this level. Masochism prevents one from focusing on this area of awareness. The person himself is reduced to a physical body, a body that suffers from whippings, or a body that is tied to the bed and cannot move. The person himself is no longer a complex identity laden with meaning. The self has become very simple, low-level, and passive. Even in cases where it is active, its activity is very simple and physical, for example, licking with the tongue or sucking the partner's body. The components of masochism, including pain, control, and humiliation, have a clear function in this regard. What happens in masochism is, and must be, in contrast with one's everyday identity. According to the theory of escape from the self, masochism is not a sign of psychological illness, and it does not originate from that. Instead, it is a way for mentally healthy people to escape, distance themselves from everyday responsibilities and identities, and live in the moment. Does this mean that all masochists are mentally healthy? Absolutely not. One would expect a group of masochists to contain their share of mentally ill, just like any other group. Masochism itself, however, is not a sign of mental illness. Masochism seems to contradict the fundamental ideas about the self. However, by taking a deeper look at the meaning of masochistic behaviors, its seeming contradictions with psychology will be resolved.